we have the latest results from local elections. We take a closer look at some of the local candidates who are vying for this election season. And joining us in the studio to discuss all of today's election news is Adjunct Instructor Bill Enright of the Political Science Department. All that and much more on this special edition of Courier TV News. Hi, and thanks for joining us. I'm Anna Pierczynski, and welcome to Courier TV News Election Coverage 2017. It isn't often that Aurora and Villa Park are at the center of the Illinois political scene, but these towns are drawing a lot of attention with their highly competitive mayoral races. CNTV reporter Paul Dipping has more on the story.
In a time when more attention is being paid to politics than ever before, mayoral elections in the Chicago suburbs are proving to be very competitive. Two races that are turning a lot of heads are in Villa Park and Aurora. The Villa Park race is for an open seat being vacated by Deborah Bullwinkle, who chose not to run for re-election after her first term.
She decided she wasn't going to seek re-election. Instead, she was going to try to move up the political chain and fill Tammy Duckworth's seat. Unfortunately for Deborah, that didn't work out too well for her. She came in third place in that race, and so she didn't win Tammy Duckworth's old seat, and now she's out as a Villa Park mayor. You know, residents in Villa Park will for sure have a new mayor this April.
This year's candidates are village trustees Bob Taglia and Al Bolfus, as well as businessman Chuck Pickerel, all of whom are fighting hard to become Villa Park's third mayor in 4 years. Aurora's mayoral race is just as competitive. Mayor Tom Weisner is stepping down after 12 years of running the town, and 5 candidates quickly stepped in to fill his shoes. This tight race led Aurora to hold a primary election on February 28th to narrow the field down to the top 2 contenders. One of the surprise losers in the primary was Democratic State Representative Linda Chapa-LaVia. Despite being a well-known name to Aurora citizens, she placed third after her opponents criticized her role in Springfield as an ally to House Speaker Michael Madigan.
Her opponents in that race apparently were successful in kind of selling this message in that, you know, Linda Chapa-LaVia, she's spent all this time in Springfield. What has Springfield done for you lately?
The top 2 finishers in the primary election are Rick Guzman, the Assistant Chief of Staff to Mayor Weisner, and Alderman Richard C. Irvin. At a candidate forum in downtown Aurora, each made their case for why they were the best candidate to lead the city.
And so what I think I bring to the table is the ability and a proven track record of identifying win-win situations, building consensus, and ultimately then being able to turn that consensus into results.
I opened a business right here in our downtown and have participated in the economy. So, you know, I've everything to offer the city because this is where I'm from, born and raised. You know, I've been here from the beginning, and I had the ability to give back, and I want to give back.
As the elections approach on April 4th, we can only expect these races to get more competitive. Reporting for CNTV News, this is Paul Dipping.
Joining us now in the studio is Adjunct Instructor Bill Enright of the Political Science Department with some analysis. So Bill, we just saw that there are 2 highly competitive mayoral races this evening. So what can you tell us about the candidates?
Well, in Aurora, it's kind of an interesting start because they had a runoff election in February where there were 6 candidates, and Guzman and Irvin won the runoff election, so they're facing each other in this general election. Guzman and Irvin have both been very interested in economic development in Aurora, especially the downtown area. But Guzman took it a little bit further and said, let's make it Aurora first, sort of like Donald Trump said, let's make America first. And what he said was, we're going to allow contracts for the city to go first to any qualified contractors out of Aurora. So that part was kind of interesting that he kind of twisted it with other themes that have been going on in America lately.
So what about the people running in Villa Park?
Yeah, the Villa Park also very centered on economic development. Of course, it's very interesting, important to them because they want to try to get as much economic development as they can, bring more businesses in, bring more tax revenue in, and so that's been a big issue for them. Bolthius is the one who was endorsed by the Daily Herald, so I'd assume that he would probably win it based on that endorsement.
And who would you say is going to win in Aurora?
Again, Guzman was endorsed by the Daily Herald there, and usually the Daily Herald carries pretty well with those constituents. So I would imagine he would probably win that one too.
So one of our producers here, who lives in Aurora, brought in all of these mailers that she has received throughout the weeks, like the last few weeks. So how effective are these mass mailings to the outcome of the races?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you think, boy, it must have cost a lot of money to put all those mailers together, mail them out, do everything with them. But in actuality, a lot of voters, it's the only way they eventually hear about a candidate. They see something in the mail, they might read it, and they need to send at least 7 or 8 just for a voter to actually see one that they're going to pick up and maybe read. And so it's really important to get those out just to get the name recognition. Either you have the signs or you have the mailers, and that's really the only way that a lot of local candidates get their name out.
So we also have 2 councilman elections that are happening tonight. So one's in Naperville and the other is in Wheaton. So what are some of the issues and concerns that are directly affecting these communities, and what have these councilmen proposed?
Yeah, going over to the Wheaton one, it's interesting in the Wheaton West district where there's 3 people running for 1 seat. One of them's an incumbent, 2 are new to the elections, and also pretty young as far as politics go. Also going back to economic development, they want to try to do more for the downtown area, bring more businesses in, have more people available or businesses available to pay taxes in it. And so it's been pretty much along those lines. Scalazzo, who's the incumbent, looks like he's probably going to have a pretty good edge on it.
And what about in Naperville?
Naperville, of course, there's 8 people running for 4 seats in the Naperville City Council, and one thing that's been kind of interesting coming out of that race is there's been some proposals that they would have a change in how the city sets itself up because they want to be able to bring more affordable housing in, knowing that the prices of housing in Naperville have been going up and up and up. The average person maybe can't afford to live there anymore, so they want to bring more affordable housing into the downtown area, and that's been one of the issues that's been circulating in the Naperville race.
So what do these 2 councilman elections, what is worth talking about in them? What makes them interesting?
Well, first of all, it's interesting because if you take a look at some of the elections going on around DuPage County, a lot of them have no opponents. For instance, I'm running for village trustee of Glen Ellen, and I don't have an opponent, so I won the race.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. But that's one of the things that is interesting in what's going on in politics in general these days, maybe the apathy towards it. And so at least we've got some people who are running who are interested in doing something in these races.
And is there anything that makes the Naperville one especially interesting?
Yeah, going back to this idea of having some sort of economic development plan to bring affordable housing in. That's the thing that's been most interesting to me. Again, there's always something along the lines that all of them want to do support of some sort of economic development to bring more businesses in, but I like the idea where somebody's trying to bring in more affordable housing in a smaller sized city, second largest in Illinois, but a smaller sized city in terms of 100,000 people living there.
So there's also a race for the COD's College Board of Trustees. They are vying for 2 open spots, 2 6-year terms, and there are 3 candidates running for that. And there's also 1 unopposed candidate running for a 2-year term. So what can you tell us about these candidates?
Yeah, I know Mark Well, who was one of them that was endorsed by the Daily Herald, happens to be a student at COD, and one proposal that he had was to build a bridge over Lambert Road so we could connect the east and west campuses. So that's a big expense if you were to go forward with something like that. Triaphalasis, I think that's how you say his name, Triaphalasis, he's interested in doing more with technology in the school, and so he wants to do more as far as cutting-edge technology techniques to improve the administration of the school. And so, and then Fenny is also interested in trying to do more, especially with moving on from what we've had in the past with the president change and the changes that have taken place at COD. She wants to put that stuff behind us and move forward with it. Also one that was endorsed by the Daily Herald.
Just going back to the student, Dan Markwell, so how has that been going for him? Because there has been talk on social media that because he is a student, shouldn't he be kind of running for the student trustee, or like it'd be the same as the student trustee? So what's the difference?
Yeah, and that's true. He could run in the student election, and of course he would be able to be part of the council. He wouldn't have a vote, but he would be part of the council as the student representative. And even that was brought up, interestingly enough, in the Daily Herald endorsements. But in the end, anybody who can run, who gets their petitions filled out and submits them, and so he certainly has the right to run, even if he's a student here.
Okay, great. So CNTV reporter Nick Petrillo talks with the candidates on the importance of this election in the college and the community.
Candidates aren't the only things vying for approval in this season's election. Multiple school districts are proposing referendums to purchase bonds to fund school improvements. Glen Ellen Elementary District 42 is asking for a small amount compared to the other districts, only $24 million.
It's specifically designed to address conditions at one of its middle schools. Especially, they kind of have a space issue there where they'd like to bring them into the middle school building as a whole right now.
On the other hand, Wheaton-Warrenville District 200 is asking for $132 million. It's a lot of money, but supporters say it will go a long way to help the district.
We feel like the referendum is well structured. It's been studied for 3 years by the school district, and they've looked at all the possible needs in the district, and they've prioritized the highest needs. It's not covering everything that everybody would like to have, but just those things that are absolutely needed in the district.
A more controversial referendum is Hinsdale District 86's. They're asking for $76 million, but some members of the community have concerns about how it will be spent.
I am not as opposed to it as the people who are on this campaign, but I do think that more of the budget should be allocated towards South just because our school is older, our pool is much more dangerous than the Hinsdale Central. A lot of the money is going to go towards a new central pool. They're going to fill the old one and build a complete new one, which I think is ridiculous. Hinsdale Central already gets a lot more in taxes just because it's a richer area. So I think we should focus more on South than Central.
As of now, there's no telling whether or not the community will approve of these referendums, but if supporters or opponents of them are able to get out the vote, it could easily make a huge difference.
So it'll really come down to, I think, how well do these various school districts do in selling the need for this money that they're asking for, and then that'll pair along with how much more can people afford to pay.
So, Bill, there are 3 referendums Courier TV is watching closely tonight. Can you give us your take on them?
Sure. In Glen Ellen, there's a referendum to basically remove some portables that were at the junior high and put in brick and mortar buildings. And so that one's $25 million. It also wants to update some things as far as disability accessibility in the buildings. And so those things certainly important, and especially to remove the basically trailers and put in some sort of brick and mortar buildings. It is contentious, though. There is a no vote out there for that, and so we'll have to see how it all turns out with the vote today. In Wheaton, there's also a much larger referendum at $132 million. Basically, they want to tear down a building and build a new building and refurbish a lot of buildings, and so that's also going to be a contentious one. And finally, in Hinsdale, there is a referendum over the pools there. They want to, from what I understand, basically take out some of the pools and put in new pools, and so certainly totally different issues for those school districts.
So can you tell us the difference between a binding and a non-binding referendum?
Yeah, a binding referendum means that this is the vote and it means it's going to become the rule or the law. Non-binding referendum is more like an advisory one, saying this is the way that the people think, we hope the legislature acts on it, but if you don't act on it, it's not like anything's going to happen. And so if you are going to do a binding referendum, that's going to be the rule or the law that's going to come out of it. We had a binding referendum in the last election basically saying highway money in the state of Illinois, anything that is raised as far as revenue for taxes that are supposed to go to roads must go to roads. And so that was a binding referendum.
So what is the school district's next step if these referendums don't pass tonight?
Well, if they don't pass tonight, then they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. There's been some talk with some of the districts that maybe they could, in some way or another, access other dollars that they have in reserves and use that to pay for it. It's an awful big chunk of money to try to access in reserves, and so they may have to do some of those things piecemeal to try to get it done. Otherwise, go back to the referendum the next time.
So how important are referendums to local elections?
You know what, really it's the final form of democracy. It's the most pure form of democracy where people get to come out and vote on a specific issue. And so in a referendum, you're going out to say, I'm willing to raise my taxes to pay for X, Y, Z. I'm willing to raise my taxes to pay for a new school or a new pool or to replace some portables at a school. And so it's the final form or the most pure form of democracy where you go out and actually vote. It's kind of interesting, there was a referendum in 2014 on the ballot for the state of Illinois, and they were both advisory referendums saying, would you like to increase the minimum wage to $10 in the state of Illinois? And the other one was whether or not we should increase the taxes for millionaires in the state of Illinois. Both of them passed by over 60%, and then neither one of them was acted on because at the same time we elected a governor who opposed both of them. And so when you talk about referendums, they're not necessarily going to be carried through if it's a non-binding.
So thanks again, Bill, for all of your insight, and we will see you back here at 10 p.m. This has been your election update. Thank you for choosing Courier TV News for your election coverage this evening. Again, we will be back at 10 p.m. with more updates, including candidates' reactions and analysis. We will have live reactions to the local elections on our Facebook page at Courier TV.